Hey guys, after Adobe Max 2025, I had some more thoughts on the way that Adobe has been embedding AI into all their different software programs, including my favorite Adobe Illustrator. And what hasn't sat well with me is the fact that a lot of these tools, the AI tools, favor the corporations. They favor the big business. They're not really there to help the end user. Or at least the end creative who's been using Adobe forever. And so I've been trying to think about what I would suggest. It's one thing to complain and be a critic, but it's another to offer some good ideas. And so I've been trying to think of some suggestions I think that would make my life easier as a longtime Adobe user for nearly 30 years. Um, what would actually benefit me? What are the kinds of things, especially if you're going to embed AI, what would actually make a difference for me? So let me preface this also by saying that to me, when I look at some of the new features that pop into Illustrator on a regular basis or Photoshop, a lot of times they're nifty, they're cute little things, but they don't actually work in a practical sense. And so there are some fundamental things that we always use the software for that when you add something new, doesn't really make a big benefit. Maybe it helps sell the new latest edition, but it doesn't actually benefit the end user like you might think. It's kind of a novelty, but in practical terms, it doesn't help with the day-to-day business. And that's where my head has been at when thinking about where I would take this software. Because, like I said, if you have AI embedded in there with the new little generative uh, toolbar, what is that encouraging you to do? It's encouraging you to create graphics or ideate graphics. I even saw a presentation where you were loading your style and then Illustrator or Photoshop would kind of try to adopt your style. Definitely in Photoshop, they have some upresing features and some removal features, which seem really practical and useful. But then when you get into the nuts and bolts, whenever they start talking about, streamlining and efficiencies and all that kind of stuff, to me, what I hear is remove creativity. And that concerns me. So again, here are my thoughts on what I would do to make Illustrator better using AI, maybe not using AI, I'm not sure. But how about this? How about if Illustrator was a little bit more predictive when creating my artwork, working inside the program, helping me set up files for print in part of my pre-press workflow, whether it's clicking a button and it sets up bleeds for me on my page, or I have some preset guides and shapes for artboards, and it was able to like predict for me what I wanted in that sense. Now, I know they have templates and things like that, but what I'm saying is kind of after the fact. A lot of times I'll be working along and realize, oh, I got to make this print ready. So I got to alter the artboard. I got to do this. Maybe they have that kind of a feature in there. Anything to help me with pre-flight. So, hey, maybe I need AI to analyze my file and tell me if I've got spot colors or RGB colors in there, if I need to switch to CMYK, things like that, where I could just do it for me, kind of search the file. Yes, I know these things can be done. Of course, you can edit and modify colors, but I'm thinking as kind of an assistant to me, the creative. And that's how I want to kind of couch these suggestions. I want AI to help me, the creative, the end user, not because I want to make more of me and so AI can adopt me and replace me. No, to make me more effective. Here's another one. How about a mock-up studio where one of the things that can be time consuming is is taking my design and putting it on a mock-up to show what it looks like in the real world. Well, yes, you can do that, and Photoshop has some of those that you can download. You can get them from Adobe stock and things you can download and make some pretty nice artwork that way. But maybe we need to embed a workplace inside Illustrator where you, the artist, can take your designs, and it already has some preloaded images, some preloaded templates that you can pop it in a little studio form, right? Instead of having to manually open a program, do this and that, but actually just open that palette and start working in that workspace. And speaking of workspaces, how about this? What if what if Illustrator was worked a little bit more like the creative brain, right? What if I could change my workspace to not just be the artboard, but how about a drawing board? What if I wanted to use some raster drawing tools inside Illustrator to quickly sketch up something and then switch back to my normal artboard? So maybe I could have this drawing space where I have kind of my clutter of reference images, sketches, and things that I'm using to develop my creative idea, and then switch back to my vector space to start doing my pen tool outlines or doing my redraws. Maybe there's a way that I can do that using traditional digital drawing tools, but then also inside allowing me to iterate without having to go from one program to the next, but actually be working inside the space. In a sense, making Illustrator my desk, and I'm just switching between my desks depending on the type of art I need to make. Other things that kind of go along with that. Maybe there's a way to embed more inspirational images, have my mood board somewhere embedded into my reference so that I have a workspace that allows me to collect some of that information. Of course, I kind of already do that. My artboard is full of reference, but maybe there's another way to approach that that could be a little more intelligent or thoughtful. How about this? Typography. Now, just like color systems work, where you can get some really good tools in Illustrator for color matching and then also color harmony. Maybe there's a way to approach typography that way. Maybe you can load up your font and uh, AI might suggest an alternative font or a complementary font to go with it. Or I know there's kind of a font identification feature, but maybe make that more obvious or more useful. So have like that typography workspace really help you in a creative way, search your type, work with your type, and adapt your designs on the fly. And maybe then AI could then help you replace fonts in a different way. I know you can do, your connect your artboards and do all that and use your graphic styles and things to record your different things, but that's a lot of setup. How about again, like a creative, I've created my design and I'm like, oh, I need to change the font and everything. Maybe I can click a button and Illustrator can go replace those things for me a little easier, a little better. Um, okay. That also goes into variable type, which I think is really cool. Maybe Illustrator can help create any font into a variable font. Why not? Okay, how about this? Speaking of graphic styles, uh, I know that it can store my stroke settings, my fill settings, stuff like that, my styles. Well, of course, I can save that as a graphic style and then apply that to different objects. But maybe that graphic style can record other things. Um, so I'm thinking about, maybe not just this gets into the AI part where, okay, maybe I'm taking my artwork and then I'm trying to then record my steps so that I can record kind of like actions work in Photoshop, where it records what I'm doing and then it can repeat that for me later on. So not necessarily generating it for me so much, especially if I need to preserve a certain way of adapting or modifying my vectors. Maybe there's a way to get it to do it for me. Um, okay. And then what about composition and drawing guides? This might go into that drawing workspace. I've always needed an isometric grid or a perspective grid that's not so clunky as the perspective grid that we have. Um, Really more for sketching and drawing so that I can move from precision mode to sketching mode, but having some preloaded grids that are different than just the straight up perpendicular grid, right? Maybe I can have a golden ratio grid in Illustrator. Maybe I can have that isometric grid I was talking about. Some of those uh, different types that we use a lot in composition, rule of thirds, some diagonal lines. I know I can manually make them, and I've done that for a long time, but maybe Illustrator can be a little more creative for me and have some of that. Um, these are some of the things I've been thinking about. I'm sure there are more, and maybe some of these things already exist in Illustrator and I don't know. That's certainly possible. But I really wish Adobe would put their thinking cap on and stop thinking about what is just going to be beneficial to the grand corporation that's going to replace me with this Illustrator that's now easier to use so that I can have, a production artist come in and basically adopt my style and then replace me making all the different assets Sure, I get it. There's a benefit to that. But how about me, the creative user? I want to have more control over what I'm doing. And not because I want somebody else to do it, but because I want to be able to control my workspace in the way I think, in the way I work. I don't know. Maybe we can see eye to eye here, Adobe. We can figure out a way to work this out. But I really fear that we're catering to the wrong customer and that some of us that have been here for a long time feel a little bit neglected. So, you know, hopefully we can come up with some new tools that might make us happy. All right. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you think.